a lot of guys go out on these dates and they have trouble closing the deal. And John and I were talking offline a couple weeks back, kind of, we always just share strategies and stuff. And one of the things that John brought up with this idea that they're going into a date or interaction with a girl in a wrong frame. And we wanted to discuss the three frames that are probably hurting your chances. I'm going to let John take over. He's got a lot more to say about this than I do, but I think you're really going to like this. It's going to be short, but we're going to go into some really solid stuff.
Yeah, I mean, basically, these frames are kind of underlying assumptions, right? So when you have bad frames, no matter what you do, it's working within that bad frame. So you're kind of hemmed in. It's basically like rules to a game, right? Like if you think about like a game like chess, like the pieces can move in certain directions. No matter how good you are at chess, you're still confined by the rules of the game. And that's kind of the way frames work. So when you're working in a bad frame, like the three I'm going to talk to you guys about today, even if you're doing things that are right tactically, because you're functioning in this bad frame, like in the chess game, you're going to end up losing out because of the bad frame. So I want to go through three frames, one that's internal, one that's tactical, and one that kind of is just overall about dating. So the first one I want to go over is kind of this like fast results frame. And this is something you see with students a lot. In fact, I always used to say that like one of the worst things that could happen to students is going on a boot camp and getting laid your first night out, because then all of a sudden you think you're really good at pickup. You're like, oh, I got laid, so I must be good with girls. Like there was a very famous mystery method instructor who got laid his first boot camp night out and then like was terrible for like the next 6 months and like didn't get laid because he thought he was really good with girls and he kind of just got lucky that one time. So thinking that you have to get fast results or that you have to do things like in a super condensed time frame or that you have to use advanced strategies when your game is not really there is one of the worst frames you can be working from, because you're always going to be trying to go too fast and you can't really you can't really run before you walk, basically. So, one of the best examples, I was on a boot camp in Vegas like a few years ago with a guy who was a really hard case student. He dressed terribly. He had glasses. He literally wore a pocket protector to the club one time. Like, he literally wore, not to the club, but to the seminar. And this guy was going into groups, and he was starting to ask logistics gathering questions. Like, he would ask the girls, like, how they got to the club or, like, what they were doing later, when these girls were, like, not interested in him at all. And I'd be like, what are you doing? He'd be like, well, I'm gathering logistics for trying to pull. And I'm like, yeah, dude, these girls literally are looking for an excuse to get away from you in the first 30 seconds. Like, you're not going that fast. So I think a lot of times guys think they're better than they are, or they think that they kind of understand these things intellectually, and they think they have to get a fast result, or they read like a case study, or, they hear about a student who did something really, really fast, and then they think they have to do that as well, and they don't take into account where they are in the process, and they start being like, they get really competitive, which is also not a good frame, like being competitive about this stuff with other guys, especially like dating gurus or people who are like better than you, right? It's like no matter what I do, like a celebrity or like one of those dudes on like Vanderpump Rules or some shitty reality show is always going to get more girls than me. Right? No matter how good my game is, like some C-level or D-level celebrity is always going to get more girls. So if I'm like competitive with those guys, then I'm always going to lose. And that's kind of what a lot of guys do when they get into this fast results frame, is they start competing with us, like the dating gurus, or they start competing with their one friend who's really good with women. And then it really gets them in this rush, and so they just start throwing out tactics. They don't build a solid foundation, and they try to just do everything way too fast. So that's the first one. The second one is actually a little more tactical. And this is what I call the permission frame. And this is something you see a lot of guys do. I recently was working with a group of dudes from England, and one of the dudes would consistently do this. He'd ask if he could kiss the girl. He'd ask if the girl wanted to go, like, isolate over here. He'd ask if she wanted to maybe, like, meet up some other time. No leading at all, just always asking for permission and allowing the girl to kind of have the control. Now, at some point, the girl is always in control, right? She's the one who says yes to sex and going back to your place and stuff. But at the same time, you have to lead. And with women, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Like, it's way better to just go too far and then reel it back and say sorry than it is to kind of keep asking if it's okay. And you can see this non-verbally, too. One of the biggest things you'll see with this is if a guy's kind of operating in this permission frame, he'll touch a girl and then he'll look at his hand. And he's basically looking to see, like, is it okay? Like, is she going to give me nonverbal permission?
Yeah, jumping in real quick on there is sometimes what I've noticed with guys that I've worked with, and I was guilty of this myself for quite a long time, is that even if I didn't ask for permission, like, is it okay if I kissed you? I would always wait for them to be the one to maybe make the sort of R-rated conversation topic. I'd want them to be the one. Like, I would never take that bold initiative of saying something slightly sexual until they said something that made me go, "Oh, it's okay now. I can flirt with her now. I can say something a little risky now."
That's very common, right? Like waiting. Guys do that with teasing too. Like that's a very common thing with students. When I work with guys, is they'll be like, "Well, what if she doesn't do anything that I can tease her for?" You know, like they're not explicitly looking for permission, but they're still looking for something that makes it okay. There's nothing that's going to make it okay. You have to just make it okay in your own mind. I mean, obviously within the law, rules of laws and consent, and idiot disclaimer there. You know, don't rape girls or kidnap them. But like, no, there's never a perfect moment. There's never like, if you just keep waiting for her to give you opportunities, you're going to be waiting a long time. So you have to stop looking for permission and be okay with messing it up. And one of the best examples of this is going for the kiss. A lot of guys think like, oh, if I go for the kiss and I get rejected, it's like the end. There's so many times I've gone home with girls after trying to kiss them unsuccessfully like 3 or 4 times. There was a girl in a boot camp in Boston where I literally kept telling her she was going to come home with me, and she kept telling me she wasn't, and then the lights went on, and I was like, all right, let's go. And she like ended up coming with me after probably telling me 30 times that she wasn't going to go home with me. So these little failures are not as big of a deal as you think they are, and it's really easy to kind of pull back, apologize, and just go back to being normal rather than waiting for that perfect moment, which may never come.
And one other thing is that just like all the frames, and I know that creating sexual frames is we're not going to get into that in this video, but that's one of the things that you're really known for. But whenever there's a frame that exists and you set it, she buys into it. So if you set a permission frame, she starts to notice like, oh, he's looking for me to say it's okay. And then it's kind of like, it's like one of those things like, there's experiments where they like, if they give somebody authority and they take advantage of it. And once she knows she has the authority, like, oh, I'm the one who says
yes.
It's
like the observer effect. Like atoms act differently when they're observed versus when they're unobserved. Like as soon as she observes that you're like looking for permission or that you're seeking her approval, yeah. I always used to say I used to draw this on the board. It's like there's 2 like little stick figures, and when one of their like there's little light bulbs around their head, and when one of the light bulbs comes on because they're seeking the other person's approval, the other person immediately becomes unattracted.
Yeah.
So I mean, you'll see it. You'll even see this with like sometimes girls will like really qualify themselves to me, and I'll find myself being unattracted to. I was just
gonna say, I've lost interest in girls the minute I'm like I can just sense they're like saying like things and they're kind of nervous, and I'm like, oh man, they're like you just went from like an 8 to a 6 in like 3 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to this really hot girl when I first moved out here, and she just kept bragging about all the stuff she was doing, and I was just like, okay. And like literally, like she just went from being hot to me just being like so uninterested and just like bored of talking to her. Yeah, I mean, it's just one of the things that we kind of just don't like people who seek our approval. It's very sycophantic. It's like when someone's a kiss ass, right? Like the reason kiss ass is a bad term is because people don't enjoy when people are just constantly like trying to get their approval. Is this okay? Is this okay? Like it's not fun. And it puts a lot of pressure on the other person because they constantly have to like give approval, right? And that's a lot of work. So you always want to make it easy. That's one thing I think guys forget about is like you always want to make it easy for the girl. Like anything you can do to make it easier for her to like move forward by taking responsibility off of her, like creating plausible deniability, right? All that stuff makes a big difference because it makes it easy for her to just say yes. All right, so the third frame I want to talk about is the traditional dating frame. And this is kind of an overall like general application frame because the traditional dating frame is really terrible. If you think about the traditional date, where are you going to go? You're going to go to a restaurant. You're going to sit across from the girl. Here's an easy tip. This tip will make you get laid on dates like 50% more. Never sit across the table from your date. Sit next to them. I literally always take girls to like a bar where I can sit next to them and start touching, or somewhere with a couch where I can sit down and start touching. Because when you're across the table, you can't touch. It's super awkward. You're going to try to like grab her hands across the table or like, like touch her on the shoulder. It's super weird. So that's the first thing, right? The traditional dating, like eating frame. Second thing is girls don't really like eating on dates. Gold diggers, dude. There's one girl I follow on Facebook. This is like one of the funniest things ever. This girl literally, she lives in Denver and she goes to Shanahan's Steakhouse on her like first dates with all these like rich older dudes, like, and posts photos all the time. Like, I really want to go to Denver and like interview one of the like waitresses at Shanahan's about like what she does. And she'll post things on Facebook like, a date is not drinks or a date is not coffee. A date is a nice restaurant. And like, yeah, those girls want to eat on meals because they're kind of gold diggers. But like normal girls, they're worried about their breath. They're worried about eating in front of you. Like, it's not sexy. It's not a good, like, you're full afterwards. Like, what if you have to use the bathroom? Like, dude, before I was good with women, I took a girl out for a fancy steak dinner at like Ruth's Chris, dropped like 250 something bucks, and then had to shit like when I got back to the girl's apartment and like stunk her whole apartment up. It's not good. So, like, the traditional date frame, right? Then what are you going to do, right? You're going to meet her there. And then the traditional date, like at the end of the date, like you're going to get a kiss on the cheek, and that's going to be it, right? And you're going to pay for everything. And that frame is not very helpful for getting laid.
And you're talking, and that's the external aspect of that frame. There's also the internal aspect of that frame, which we're going to go into in a second. I'm going to tell them about our special training that we're putting together for Thursday. But the internal aspect of that frame is when you're on a date with a girl like that is, I'm going to show you that I'm boyfriend material.
Yep.
And it's like when you set that frame of like we're trying to see if we're a match, right? If we're going to be romantically involved in boyfriend girlfriend,
when it becomes like a job interview.
Yeah, it's like a job interview. It puts so much more pressure on you and her, and it's always like I always say that when you start acting like that, you know, she's going to put on that like prudish, I'm a good girl attitude because that's what she thinks now you expect from her. Because she like if you have one of those dates where you mentioned where you meet her out at like a happy hour and stuff, well, she's like, okay, he expects him to be fun and like sexy, but when you take her out on this like date and you pick her up, like she's like, oh, I have to be this vision he thinks I should be.